Hi there. 545 days ago, I was an idiot. I had a part of an idea for a game, and instead of fleshing that idea out, I just jumped in and started making a game, which was great, right up to the point where I had to turn my tech demo into a game. At that point, I realized that my game was held together with popsicle sticks and glue and would surely crumble under the weight of more features if I could even add more features and program them on top of the current crummy state of the game's systems at the time. So, let's try that again.
The dog and the cat are tainted with it, and a house full of the impenetrable mystery.
Sorry that you're off of my webcam for this video, and you're also in Southpaw Development's dungeon. It's a rental from the Master Engineering. This temporary setup won't affect my ability to make things. It will make it slightly hard to record. But you come here for my games and not the ambiance, I'm assuming. So, back to it. Okay, look, that is a very ambitious and arrogant title I'm giving this game, and of course that's a bit of an exaggeration, but let me explain it to you and I think you'll see what I mean. The game is going to be a large-scale conquest-type deal where you navigate troops around a larger map like Risk. But unlike Risk, each conflict between these troops happens in their own battle map with more XCOM-like gameplay. Your units that are fighting on these maps and being moved between places on the bigger campaign map are the same persistent units, not just nameless, faceless soldiers. And like I said in the last video, I like permadeath, so if they die, they're dead. But so far, it just sounds like a pretty bog-standard strategy game, so why have I given it such a lofty accolade? Preemptively so? Well, that's because I'm also going to be building tools to create your own user-generated content at each level of this game built right into and opened up to the Steam Workshop, meaning if you're just a general consumer and player of the game, you can play the few built-in campaigns I'll have in the game and use the multiplayer, which I'm not entirely sure how that bit's gonna look just yet, but then you can open up the Steam Workshop and grab more content than you could ever possibly play knowing the Steam Workshop. Meaning, if you like the core mechanics of the game, you can play this game forever, provided it gets popular enough to have a bunch of people making content for it. And if you're one of those people who like the game mechanics but really wish you could make the scenario, or this scenario, or that scenario, you can, and you don't need 3D modeling skills to make new looking units or programming skills to write new scenarios. It will have ultimate ease of access. Obviously, end all strategy games is hyperbolic. I love strategy games, and I will be buying XCOM 3 should it eventually release. I want people to keep innovating in this genre. That's the whole point of everything I do. But this game is designed to live forever, and not in the malicious live service way that is currently plaguing this industry. Mind you, the operative word there is designed. We actually have to make it now.
We are certain it is a matter of first principles.
The first step was, unfortunately, making documentation to plan out the systems in advance. It's fairly boring, so I won't show you much of it, but it helps make sure I can scale the game as it goes along. This is also something I would never have thought of if it weren't for college, so I guess thank you, Full Sail University. Anyway, the main brunt of this project is going to fall into 3 categories: the battle map, the campaign map, and units. The campaign map is going to tie the other 2 together, so we can pretty safely save that one for later, but the other 2 we have a bit of a chicken and egg problem. We need units to go on the maps and make use of them, and we need maps to have somewhere to put the units. The way I see it, this game is going to need a lot of file input and output, so let's figure out how we want to configure the unit files and make the unit builder first.
We have already made great strides in this direction as regards the Earth.
Like I mentioned, the high-level concept of this game is large military campaigns with 2 or more groups facing off against one another. These are referred to as factions. Factions in-game are made of the specific units you have, like Sergeant Smith the Paratrooper. But from a game design standpoint, Sergeant Smith the Paratrooper is an instance, Sergeant Smith, of a type of unit, the Paratrooper. The unit builder is used to design these types of units, not the specific named units. When you're playing a campaign and are awarded and earn a new unit, that unit will be of a certain type. Those types are made here, but its name and other personal information will be randomized from a pool of options. Of course, you'll have some control over the random parts too, like making your own pool of names to pull from if you want your faction to seem like they're from a real-world region. You'll be able to make custom stats, weapons, cosmetics, and design abilities with the ability shorthand system I'm making, which is kind of like a layer of pseudocode that sits in between you and C++ using coding blocks, kind of like Scratch if you've ever seen it. But that whole thing is well outside the scope of this video, and it's all just theory at the moment. So if you want to see that, subscribe. Right now, of course, the unit builder is still in a very simple state where you can give the units names, health, movement speed, time units, and some flags like invisible or flying or so on. Although, again, that logic isn't in the game yet. For testing purposes, these units need a few basic stats so that they could actually be considered units. But they should also have customizable cosmetics so that you can tell the classes apart from one another. All units will have some customizable armor attachments, but at their simplest level, all of their basic meshes have a texture that has 1 to 3 selectable colors, like a shirt or pants or skin, that sort of stuff. This will function pretty similar to the armor system in XCOM 2, although you'll have a little more control over it to kind of move and shift stuff around to make things look different. But those will be controllable with those colors, and there will also be an alliance color area of the texture. There's the associated color for the commander that's controlling it, kind of like the Marines in StarCraft 2. To do that, I built these little widgets that let you pick from a selection of colors. Some of them you can only pick one color, used for standard uniform type stuff like clothing. But for some of them, you can select multiple colors, and when a new unit of that class is spawned, it'll be given a random one of those colors. Useful for things like skin color if you want a diverse group of soldiers. These colors will change based on the base mesh you've chosen to build your unit off of. That selection also affects things like the type of weapon graphics that they can have. It wouldn't make sense for a humanoid to be running around with a howitzer tank turret, and vice versa. It wouldn't make sense for a big tank chassis to have a humanoid assault rifle just floating on it, at least visually. If you are making your own unit, you can of course give the weapons the stat equivalent to whatever damage you want, but they have to look the part. All of that is down the road, though. You don't need custom weapons if you don't have a game. So for now, I write some code to save the unit stats to a file on your computer so that you can load them somewhere else. And now I think it's time to move on to the map builder so we can get these guys moving around.
The whole house and garden are one vast obscenity.
As I've learned from Southpaw Development's texture builder, making an intuitive user interface to move objects around a 3D space is pretty hard, and it's going to take a while. So for the time being, I'll be relying on Unity's editor interface to move stuff around while I develop the saving and loading. Strategy games usually happen in some kind of grid-based world. The best example I know of is probably XCOM 2. To this end, the world is going to be made up of cubes, and some scenery and some non-organic stuff like walls and whatnot will be more detailed models. For now though, these cubes that make up the terrain, which I've taken to calling terrain cubes, will follow a couple rules that'll let us pathfind and run an optimal game with them. First rule, terrain cubes look like this, with their anchor being flat on top, meaning their coordinate in the 3D space is the center of the top of the cube. With this, we can tell the pathfinding logic that, hey, if there's a terrain cube at this coordinate, it can be walked on, as it is the flat top surface of a cube. Rule number 2, however, is that since terrain cubes are designed to be stacked to make mountains and hills and all that good earth stuff, it needs to be able to block off the cube at the coordinate below it so that you can stack it and units won't be walking through solid ground. Rule 3 is actually a pretty fun one and one you may have seen before. Each terrain cube is, a cube, which means it is made up of 6 separate faces. If you have a hill made of 55 cubes, that's 330 faces that the computer has to render and check for collision and all of that jazz. So we need to employ the mechanic most popularly used by Minecraft to optimize things. That is, if the face of a cube is flush against another face of a cube, that means these two are pressed up against each other and we cannot see it. In that case, we don't need to render it. Using that logic, we can take this 55 cube hill here from its original 330 faces the computer is rendering down to 118, which is a pretty substantial improvement, especially if you extrapolate that logic out to potentially thousands of cubes. With that, we have a workable, by which I mean barely functioning, terrain. Save it to a file, and from here, it should be a pretty simple process to get a unit moving around it. Right?
If each side had been frankly contending for its own real wish, they would all have kept within the bounds of reason and courtesy.
Do you guys remember flow fields I ranted about in the last video? Well, here's the problem with those. This is war. The game is war. The terrain should change. Buildings should collapse, paths and bridges should get blown up, paths should open up and close, and every single time that happens with flow fields, every single flow field for the entire map would have to be remade, because every single flow field includes all of the tiles. Every time you do that, there is a gigantic lag spike because it's doing calculations for thousands and thousands of spots, So we need a change. The king of RTS-style pathfinding is called A-star pathfinding. I've never made that before outside of a very structured college lab exam, and I looked it up. I did some tutorials, I found my old notes from college, and I did successfully make it. It also took me until about 4 hours before the deadline I set myself for this video to do it, which isn't ideal for building new features on top of it. Anyway though, A-star pathfinding. It's a bunch of different math that is mostly guesswork. It's a lot like teaching a blind person to walk. They also don't have sound or smell or hearing, so they just have to kind of reach out and touch the walls that they get close to and work their way from there. And every time they do that, you yell, "Hey, you're X distance away from the goal." And then they figure it out. They're smart. It's a smart blind person. But with that, it can make the paths at runtime and pretty quickly, which is a large improvement, which actually lets me manipulate the environment at runtime like I would like to. Flow fields are good, but they can't do that. I've got this little debug scene set up here. You can see we've loaded in the map from the map builder. And I can make this path go around these corners, go down this bridge, and navigate to there. It works pretty well, but what's really nice about this when you take the A-star pathfinding and the terrain cube system I have set up is if I go and remove this cube here, say it got blown up, the pathfinding system finds the new path with virtually no lag, which is great because waiting for a solid 15 seconds after you blow something up every single time would be really, really obnoxious. Imagine if Battlefield froze every time you blew up a building in that. But as you can see here, we've got paths working, which is great. We can get units moving into that. I cannot wait. However, we're gonna have to, because that's all the time I have for this month's work. I hope you're enjoying this. I'm enjoying making a game again. If you want to see where this goes, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next month.
Meanwhile, I have you to settle with. Most truly do I sign myself, your increasingly and ravenously affectionate Uncle Screwtape.